Good morning, everyone. Greetings. It's Naomi Wolf of DailyClout and Outspoken, and I'm here with one of the real heroes of the last 4 years, Dr. Jeyanthi Kunadhasan. Welcome, Dr. Kunadhasan.
Thanks, Dr. Wolf. Can I
That's
call you
fine.
Naomi?
Call me Naomi.
Okay.
We're old friends.
Thank you.
So Dr. Kunadhasan made time for us in her global travels. It's very late where she is right now, but she did us the kindness of appearing to speak with us because this is part 2 in my who knows how many parts, expose revelation of the fact that unfortunately powerful men on Capitol Hill are appropriating without credit the work of the War Room DailyClout Pfizer Documents research team. And to refresh your memory, because the project has been kind of concluded, but it made a gigantic impact and still makes a gigantic impact worldwide. This is a project of 3,250 doctors and scientists, among whom Dr. Kunadhasan was one of the most active, she accomplished some of the biggest milestones of the entire project. And they worked for 2.5 years, nearly 3 years, going through the 450,000 Pfizer documents released under court order by a successful lawsuit by attorney Aaron Siri against the Food and Drug Administration. So I'm just going to read Jeyanthi Kunadhasan's bio, Dr. Kunadhasan's bio. And this is from an organization called Australians for Science and Freedom, but she's very well known. And so there are, many bio locations I could choose from. So Dr. Jeyanthi Kunadhasan was a consultant anesthetist at a major regional Victoria, Australia public hospital in practice for more than 12 years until she was mandated out in October 2021. And we'll find out more exactly what that means. She has a clinical interest in patient blood management, where she spearheaded many initiatives that sustainably brought down the unnecessary transfusion rates in major surgeries, leading to improved patient outcomes and lower cost to the health system. Incredibly distinguished physician. So again, welcome, Dr. Kunadhasan.
Thank you, Naomi. Thanks for the kind words of welcome. And also, first of all, there were many, a few years ago, it was just a really scary time. So there are lots of heroes, obviously, Steve Bannon and yourself and Amy Kelly as well. But all the stuff that I wrote about and produced, I could not have done without my teammate. So basically, I am in team 3, was in team 3 of a team of volunteers, but widely, all the stuff that we did and that we discovered were on the backs of a lot of people anonymously going through the data and preparing it for us. So first of all, I want to actually give a shout out to them. It was really grinding, thankless work, and they deserve a warm welcome.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. It's a little difficult to hear your audio. Is there a way for you to perhaps move a little closer to the microphone or turn up the volume in some way?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Or maybe even just speak a little louder. We can go old school with just asking you to
Is it better now?
It's a bit better, yeah.
Okay.
And if you'd now just raise there you go. Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Kunadhasan. All right. Well, people who were watching yesterday, I'm going to give a little bit of context for this important broadcast today. And it's very important to remember that it's not just Dr. Kunadhasan's work that's being erased, as she just pointed out, and appropriated, I would say, nearly plagiarized. It's also the work of her teammates, some of whom are named, some couldn't be named in Team 3. And as she just said, it wasn't fun work, not for them, not for Amy Kelly, not for me, but they were definitely in the front lines of what was not fun about it. It was laborious. It was every one of these 109 reports that this group of heroic volunteers working for no money and at great risk to themselves put out was hours and hours and hours and countless hours of labor consulting globally with each other, overseeing tens of thousands of documents, reviewing painstakingly tens of thousands of documents. So what's happening now, and then they issued these 109 reports, and we've published 2 books. We published them all on DailyClout. I tried to break every story or bring the stories they broke to Steve Bannon's War Room. He's sort of the godfather of the project. He inspired it, and encouraged us to do this. None of us, were they were not compensated. They took tremendous risks. So what's happening is right now, I'm very upset. As you know, I literally broke down in tears in yesterday's broadcast because powerful men on Capitol Hill are literally, I don't want to get sued by saying stealing their work, but I would definitely say appropriating their work without credit, without recognition, and really assigning the credit and recognition to themselves and their staff, and their own reputations. It's absolutely disgusting, and writing these people out of history. And I must note that many of these people they're writing out of history are women. That may or may not be relevant, but I have to notice that, for instance, the people who were present in Senator Johnson's much covered Senate hearing on Tuesday on Capitol Hill about the myocarditis cover-up at the highest levels of the Biden administration, which was a story that our lawyer, to recap, Ed Berkovich, broke, and then Amy Kelly broke it with him. 5 articles on DailyClout in 2023, appearances on War Room, showing Ed Berkovich's and then Amy Kelly's work, laboriously going through hundreds of pages of emails to lift out the timeline, the relevant issues, the story. Senator Johnson just appropriated, with one little footnote, which isn't a proper citation to Ed Berkovich, and Dr. Kunadhasan was not invited to present yesterday. Carol Ticetta, whose work was also appropriated about the black box warning, was not invited, not yesterday, on Tuesday. She was not invited to present on Tuesday. Amy Kelly, also I note, a woman, another person who broke this incredible story with 2 major tranches of those emails in 2023, was not invited to present on Tuesday. The editor, Dr. Naomi Wolf, was not invited to present on Tuesday, but 5 men were invited to present, and God bless Dr. McCullough, who credited our team for having broken these stories, the only one to have credited us properly. But unfortunately, Senator Johnson and his staff, relentlessly appropriated the work of Ed Berkovich and Amy Kelly and Dr. Ticetta in their 50-plus page Senate report, in their comments. We got 2 of us, I believe, got a passing shout out, maybe 3, with verbal remarks. That is an acknowledgement. It's not a citation. And I don't think Carol Ticetta was mentioned at all. Dr. Kunadhasan was not mentioned at all. And it's an absolute erasure of the work of others and an appropriation of the work of others. And I am very angry on behalf of my team, because who's shown a light on the work that was not being credited? The New York Post, Reuters, Gateway Pundit. Around the world, the story of the myocarditis cover-up, which lawyer Ed Berkovich and Amy Kelly broke and reported over and over, and the story of the black box warning being missing, a standard FDA warning, which wasn't added, which should have been triggered by the serious side effects that Pfizer knew and the FDA knew were taking place. That was omitted. Well, Dr. Carol Ticetta, a woman with 25 years of experience overseeing drug approvals, she got completely erased from history, and yet her work is in the Senate report and in the headlines. Oh my God, black box warning missing. That's Dr. Ticetta's work, Senator Johnson and staff. And I am not going to shut up about it. It is wrong. As an author, as a journalist, as a trained academic, I know, and everyone knows, you learn in 8th grade, if someone else broke the story first, you credit them. You credit them with a mention in the text every time you use their work. Then you credit them with a full citation in the footnote and in the appendix and bibliography. If there's an appendix and bibliography, you credit them in your written remarks. If you're using someone else's work, Senator Johnson and his staff would not have known where to look, or even that there was a story of a myocarditis cover-up at the highest levels in the Biden administration, if I hadn't told him in a phone call and said, this is the most politically explosive aspect of, what we found among the stories, of course, what Dr. Kunadhasan is about to talk about also, which I also told him about last, I believe, December, after the election, but before the inauguration. And I said, I would really recommend that you focus on these stories in your hearing. In a million years, I wouldn't have thought that would lead to our team being left out of the hearing, on which which was entirely based on their work, completely left out, and no acknowledgement to the New York Post, to the Wall Street Journal, to the Washington Post, to the Gateway Pundit, to any of the people, now saying, oh my God, breaking story, breaking. It literally says breaking. And I, have to be there on social media saying, they broke this in 2023. Here's the link. They broke this in 2023. Here's the link. It is disgusting. It is disgusting. So having said all of that, and Autumn Smith rightly says, junior high journalism, citations, credit, bibliography, right? We're not babies. We know this. And I'm, to my astonishment, getting phone calls from allies of, the guys on Capitol Hill, basically saying those rules don't apply to senators. Well, respectfully, Senator Johnson, they do apply to senators. They apply to everyone. Being an elected official does not exempt you from ethical use of other people's work. It doesn't exempt you from the ethical journalism, ethical academics. They're not guidelines, they're requirements. If you don't want to plagiarize, literally, you are obligated to cite and credit the work of others. And so now finally there was a hearing which the posse, which supported this project with tiny checks, out of their Social Security for 2.5 years, because they wanted the truth to come forward. All they wanted was hearings. All they wanted was for these heroes to eventually be sitting in front of Congress and saying, this is what happened. This is the truth that we found. Well, they didn't get that because their work was stolen. Their work was stolen. And I'm sorry, don't sue me. I can back this up. Their work was appropriated without credit. I don't know what else you call that except theft. And so here we have Dr. Kunadhasan. So again, Dr. Kunadhasan's she broke some of the most important stories, as I mentioned, of this entire project. And we're going to drill down into one of them because there's another elected official stealing the work of our team right now, even as we speak, and that's Representative Jim Jordan. So I don't get sued, I will say appropriating. And honestly, I would say the Wall Street Journal too, but I will get to that. So Dr. Kunadhasan should really go down in history, and bear with me, Dr. Kunadhasan, I know it's a long intro, but she should go down in history for many reasons. But one of them is that she broke this story, huge story, which is not related to this, but just to give you a sense of what a towering intellect this woman is and how brave she's been. She broke this story laboriously. All of these stories took just countless man and woman hours of the fact that Pfizer had hidden 8 dead people who were vaccinated and died with COVID. No?
So at the point of the EUA approval in December 2020, Pfizer publicly said there were 6 deaths, but actually there were 11. So there are 5 missing people, but we don't have paperwork as good we only have paperwork that's good that the clinical site was informed of the death only for 2 patients. So these are vaccinated deaths, one's in Kansas and one's in Georgia. So basically it's 2 deaths that we have receipts that they were informed of the deaths well before the data cutoff, and should have been disclosed publicly in the FDA meeting, but wasn't.
Gotcha. Thank you for that correction. So the bottom line is they did something illegal and unethical to end up with fewer dead people who died who were vaccinated who died with COVID than otherwise, correct?
And it's actually, the biggest news is that the patient in Kansas, the 63-year-old lady who died in Kansas, well within the data reporting period, she had an autopsy result available, and that result was sudden cardiac death. So that's why the letter to AG Chris Kobach was so important, because all the receipts, as you've told us very carefully, put all the receipts there. So all the receipts pertaining to that patient is there. It's like a package of evidence
wow.
for attorneys.
Thank you, Dr. Kunadhasan. So explain to everyone what the letter to Attorney General Kobach is. You created it, right?
Yes. So basically, I wrote a letter to Attorney General Chris Kobach highlighting the fact, well, he's actually suing Kansas for, he's suing Pfizer for false advertising, but he needs to investigate a death in the clinical trial for a Kansas woman who died, whose death should have been reported publicly when before they approved the drug, and it was hidden. And there was an autopsy result that said sudden cardiac death. If we think of all the things that happened outwardly, people suddenly dying, this was when the cat was still in the bag, and they sat on that person. And imagine if you were a person who went through a clinical trial, you died, and you had an autopsy, and they hid it. It's such a desecration. It's such a desecration of the process.
Absolutely. So disrespectful to that dead woman, a dead American in Kansas. You've identified literally, where these poor people passed away after receiving the Pfizer injection. However, I would also add, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kunadhasan, the kind of political massive importance of your finding of the story you broke is that if Pfizer had not hidden those deaths, they would have had to report the truth, which is more people died and were hospitalized who were vaccinated than not vaccinated, correct?
Absolutely. So there was somehow something in their process that they couldn't report deaths in the vaccinated arm as they could in the placebo arm. And if they had reported it honestly, it would have been more deaths in the vaccinated arm than the placebo arm. And it's not going to be the best advertisement for the drug.
Right. You're more likely to die if you take this injection. So just explain what a vaccinated arm means. I think most people would think like cohort or group, correct, in a study?
Yeah. So prior to the approval of the drug in December 2020, there were two arms of the study. So one was a group that got the vaccine. One was a group that had the placebo. So the placebo was supposed to be normal saline, which is something quite innocuous. And the placebo was the BNT vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. So what we found were deaths, one in Kansas and the other one's in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So deaths that happened well within the reporting period. And their loved ones actually called the clinical site to inform of their death. And the problem is, once the clinical sites informed of the death, they're supposed to, basically, that's their trial protocol. They need to inform Pfizer no less than 24 hours.
Right.
No later than 24 hours.
They didn't follow their own rules, basically.
We don't know. That's another level of, so the form where the clinical trial site informs Pfizer is not publicly available.
Right.
What we have is the form where the clinical trial site documents that someone's reported to them that this person's died. The next level is the form where the clinical trial site now has to tell Pfizer no later than 24 hours, within a day, that this person has died. That form is not publicly available, and there needs to be an outcry from people to ask the attorney generals in Kansas and Georgia to get that second level of paperwork, so that there's accountability for these patients.
Right.
Subjects.
Well, if you were being invited to Capitol Hill appropriately to present, you would have much more power to push that revelation than is taking place right now, as you and Amy Kelly and Ed Berkovich and Dr. Techeta and I are being erased from appearing to claim our own work. And to present it to a wider audience through Senate hearings. Now so that like, if that had been appropriately covered when you broke that story, everyone around the world would have known that you're more basically Pfizer fudged the math, hid people who died after being injected with such direct causality that their loved ones called and said, our loved one died after being injected, which is pretty damning, as you say. And everyone in the world would have known, again, that because they did the math wrong, if they'd done the math right intentionally, if they'd done the math right, they would have had to tell the FDA, the White House, the American public, the world public, you're more likely to be hospitalized and die with COVID if you're vaccinated than not, which is what data now reveal. Is that correct, Dr. Kunadhasan? All right.
Yep.
So that was your story. You broke that story. All right. Now let's go to the other story that you're being completely not credited for. All right. May we?
Yes, one thing though, I just want to credit. So that story was broken on the backs of our forensic paper. So our forensic paper was basically the first paper in the peer-reviewed literature that actually examined the Pfizer data, and from a group that was not affiliated with the trial sponsor. So it was layers upon layers, and the hidden deaths were the final revelation, but it stands on the back of the forensic paper.
Thank you. And that's very important. Your team's work made it into the peer-reviewed literature, which was an extraordinarily high bar, especially at that time, for findings that were critical with real science of the process of approving the injection, let alone the outcome of receiving the injection. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. We were rejected by more mainstream journals. I mean, like, more well-known journals, and then had to seek we had to work really hard to get it published.
Bottom line, I would say, is your credentials for the science around the Pfizer injection with this peer-reviewed publication and all the other work you've done are at least as strong as the people who were invited, at least some of them, right? I should say, to testify in a hearing in which the War Room DailyClout experts were not invited. I mean, that's something I'm saying. You are a highly credentialed anesthesiologist. You and your team published your findings in a peer-reviewed publication. You are not a yoga mom. Is my, like, we're being treated like yoga moms essentially.
And we shouldn't disparage yoga moms. They have
I'm sorry. That was the throwaway comment. But you're not like a casual amateur. You're a highly credentialed professional in the field of scientific research. All right. Now let's move on to what you're now being not credited for, which is I would say an equally gigantic story. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So share screen. Let's go to new allegations. This is right from, can you all see my screen? Let me check that you can see. Yep, you can. All right. So unfortunately, this is our tax dollars at work appropriating Dr. Jeyanthi Kunadhasan's labor. So this is a May 15th press release. New allegations about timing of Pfizer COVID. New allegations. I'm just going to cry about timing of Pfizer COVID vaccine passed to House panel. This is written by Annie Linsky and Josh Dawsey, and it's from the Wall Street Journal. Lawmakers are investigating, and by the way, the Wall Street Journal has to update their story to credit you. Lawmakers are investigating whether Pfizer waited to share results of the COVID vaccine in 2020 till after that year's presidential election, based on new allegations that a former Pfizer scientist has said he was part of an effort to, quote, deliberately slow down, end quote, the testing, according to a new letter from the House Judiciary Committee. So a House panel is seeking information from Pfizer and from the scientist, Philip Dormitzer, after learning that he allegedly told colleagues in 2024, which is after you broke your story, at a subsequent job, he was worried he would face an investigation of his role in the vaccine's release and asked to be relocated to Canada. Now, the reason he was worried is that you had already broken the story of the delay. No one else had broken the story at that point. Dormitzer has since denied that he or anyone at Pfizer tried to delay the vaccine and has said that his comments to colleagues at drug maker GSK, where he took a job in 2021, have been misinterpreted. GSK first reported Dormitzer's alleged comments to federal prosecutors in New York late last year. Again, 2 years after you broke your story, leading them to launch a probe into Pfizer's vaccine timing. According to GSK's account to the House panel, Dormitzer told colleagues at the British drug maker last year, after you broke your story, that 3 of the most senior people at Pfizer research and development were, quote, involved in a decision to deliberately slow down clinical testing so that it would not be complete prior to the results of the presidential election that year, end quote. And bear with me, everyone. I'm going to go carefully through this so you can see how much theft is going on here. The GSK employees also recounted that Dormitzer, quote, was clear that this was not a situation of delaying disclosure of completed results, but was a situation of slowing down results before disclosure became necessary, end quote, according to the letter. So you've got a House panel sending a letter about a situation in which Pfizer slowed down the process till after the election. GSK's report to the House panel alleges that in asking for the move to Canada, a, quote, visibly upset, end quote, Dormitzer told a GSK human resources official that the timing of the release, quote, wasn't a coincidence. So Amy Rose, a Pfizer spokeswoman, said the company had received the letter and, quote, would respond directly to the committee. So the committee is looking into this. And here we have the person who's not crediting Dr. Kunadhasan. The House Judiciary Panel Chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, citing a March Wall Street Journal, after you broke your story, report of the federal prosecutor's probe, asked GSK last month for information, meaning April, 2 years after you broke your story, about the allegations. The material from GSK provides Republicans on the House panel with fresh leverage to pursue a potentially explosive investigation into whether officials at one of the country's top pharmaceutical companies wielded its testing process to influence the 2020 election. Biden narrowly won the contest and made Trump's handling of the pandemic a focus of the campaign. All right. So in nowhere in this Wall Street Journal article is your article or your story mentioned, credited. The House panel isn't mentioning it, nor are they crediting it. The Judiciary Committee isn't mentioning it, nor are they crediting it. Jim Jordan, Representative Jim Jordan, isn't mentioning it, nor are they crediting it. Now, bear with me because I know this is a lot. I will give you the floor abundantly in just 2 more minutes. I'm going to repeat now. I hope everyone understands what a big story this is. There was a hotly contested election in 2020. There was a pandemic. Everyone was saying, we need the vaccine, we need the vaccine. Operation Warp Speed was underway. President Trump was waiting for the vaccine. It was going to make a big difference. My dog is sitting on my lap because he knows I'm upset. This is Loki. Instead of Pfizer moving at the speed of science, meaning when they had their results, to send the FDA the conclusion so the FDA could say, okay, safe and effective, even though it turned out not to be, but that was the conclusion they were going to make, right? In a timely way, which would have been before the election, giving Trump the advantage in the election, in a tight election. Instead, they intentionally slow walked the safe and effective till right after the election, disadvantaging President Trump and advantaging challenger Joe Biden. So almost there, Dr. Kunadhasan. When I spoke to Senator Johnson last December, I believe, I said, this is the other politically explosive story. It's very important. It's going to get a huge amount of press. I recommend that you focus on this as well. Well, let's take a look at Report 76 now, shall we? This makes me so angry. I'm going to share my screen, share screen. Here's Report 76. Okay, baby. Oh, my goodness. July 10th, 2023, by Dr. Jeyanthi Kunadhasan and Ed Clark, Team 3. Report 76. Pfizer had data to announce its COVID-19 vaccine's alleged efficacy in October 2020. Why did Pfizer delay the announcement until November 9th, 2020, 6 days after the 2020 US federal presidential election? And then they break it down again very laboriously, explaining the details of how Pfizer basically disobeyed its own contract with the government to deliberately slow walk the announcement. And all the details, all the receipts are there. They link to the Pfizer documents, and they stress, therefore, an announcement of vaccine efficacy could have been made in October 2020 before the US 2020 presidential election. When you read on, you will likely have the same question we do. Was this unnecessarily delayed announcement an effort to negatively impact one candidate's chances of winning the US presidential election? And all the receipts are right there. Oh my goodness. There's the name of the contractor. There's the contract, the Pfizer contract, showing that they were disobeying their own contract. There's the basis of the efficacy cases presented to the FDA. They turned out not to be effective, but that's a different story. And they show all the receipts, a laborious article, absolutely impeccable. No one said it was wrong. This is July of 2020. All right, now we're going to see, I'm almost done, Dr. Kunadhasan. I'm so angry. We're going to take a look at, oh my goodness, what else is there? Who's covering this and not giving Dr. Kunadhasan credit? It's CNN. And CNN says, Pfizer CEO, our vaccine timing had nothing to do with politics. So now everyone's getting in on this gigantic story that Dr. Kunadhasan broke. CNN is, quote unquote, covering the story, which Dr. Kunadhasan broke. All the major media are covering it. Her name has not been mentioned once, not in the press release, not by Representative Jordan, not by Senator Johnson, who I'm assuming alerted the House Judiciary Committee, unless they saw it on War Room in July and were aware of it. She's been completely written out of history for this, and so is Team 3, and so is Ed Clark. So, Dr. Kunadhasan, over to you. What is your view of this?
Thank you, Naomi. So basically in a lot of the reporting, so when I first saw it, I was really excited. I was like, they're finally going to cover it. When I wrote it, I was actually pretty scared to write the report. It was actually, I thought, oh my God, I figured this out. This is actually quite scary information. In the reporting that I've seen at the moment, what they say is that there's no evidence that Pfizer did it. So what I think is that the way we found the evidence is a difficult, it took a lot of laborious analyzing to come up with our report. Right. And it's not one of those pieces of paper where you get a screenshot and then you publicize it. It took a lot of, analyzing, digging deep into documents and cross-analyzing. We cross-referenced everything. So from what I have seen, basically everybody says there's no evidence. So what?
Sorry to jump in, Dr. Kunadhasan. When you say everybody, what are you talking? Who are you?
The news reports I've read. All about this story. Basically, the news reporting that I've seen that came out probably maybe nearly a month ago, I think, that the Southern District of New York was probing it, and that was what was broken by Reuters and the Wall Street Journal. They say to this date, there's no evidence Pfizer did it. So I think if you were a reporter and you went to the PHMPT website, you wouldn't be able to figure out the story.
Right. But you know what? Figuring out through and your team and Ed Clark.
Yes.
Detective work.
Yeah. So I sort of hope we can publicize it, and if Chairman Jim Jordan needs help in understanding our report, I'm more than happy to go to take his team through how we got the data, how we actually show Pfizer had enough cases to declare an efficacious vaccine as early as October, the first 2 weeks of October.
Right.
And basically Pfizer and the deep state, in some officials in the FDA, they changed the rules. And then even when they told the world on November 8th, and they put out the press release on November 9th that they had 94 cases, they were actually sitting on 40 more cases. They had 134 cases. And in the contract, they were supposed to tell the Trump administration, if they were going to be delayed by a week.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the only reason
and they didn't. You're saying they didn't obey their own contract with the
absolutely, and the contract with the Trump administration was for the delivery of an approved vaccine by the 31st of November 2020. The only way that could have been done is if they did the interim analysis when they reached the first threshold, which was 32 cases. And the decision to not do the analysis at 32 cases is the decision that denied an early vaccine announcement before November 2020. And that's what Chairman Jim Jordan needs to understand, because whatever Mr. Dormizes says, the actual 170 patients upon whom the claim, the 95% effective claim is made of, the story is not just of the 170, it's when they were diagnosed and when they reach the different thresholds, 32 cases, 62 cases, and so forth. So the decision not to do, and if you read, it's all in the report, it's all in report 76. If you read the report, Pfizer always says, we omitted not to do the 32 case threshold analysis for operational reasons. So the question that Chairman Jim Jordan needs to ask Albert Bourla is, what were the operational reasons to not do the analysis at 32 cases? In his letter, Chairman Jim Jordan, that he openly that he sent to Albert Bourla, he said, we have to investigate this for public health interest, because when they reached the 32 case threshold, the vaccine efficacy was 100%. So now, if you look at it from Pfizer's point of view, why do you deny the American public a 100% effective vaccine?
Right. You mean that they somehow managed to hold back till several days after the election?
So what happened is, and the thing is that even when they told the story publicly, they didn't quite keep their story straight. So Pfizer told, so now if you think about it, Pfizer signed a contract with the Trump administration that you have to deliver a safe and effective vaccine approved by the FDA by the 31st of October. Then in public reporting, Albert Bourla says that he's not allowed to look at the vaccine efficacy data till after November 4th or 5th. So how do you sign a contract if you can't look at the efficacy
That's a huge
data?
Dr. Kunadhasan, what you just said is another giant story. It's a story within the story that you broke, that
absolutely.
Well, to me as a political consultant, it's very important that President Trump said, you've got to deliver this vaccine by October 31st. Why? So in the last push of a hotly contested presidential election, he could have a press conference saying, look, we've got a vaccine, November 1st, we've got a vaccine. You've got, several days to process this before you go vote for me. And they intentionally delayed their own commitment to President Trump to deliver a vaccine by October 31st. And they held back till after the election. Correct?
Correct. And also so even in the public reporting, Pfizer says we did the first interim analysis November 8th, but in the FDA paperwork, they said that they reached the 94 case threshold November 4th. So even then but the thing is, they actually reached 94 cases October 30th.
So they literally could have announced this October 31st and met the terms of their agreement with President Trump, and they chose not to. All right. Well, no wonder this employee at GSK is scared. He's scared of you, Dr. Kunadhasan. Because you reported this at that point that he told his HR people, I need to go to Canada because they're going to investigate me. You had reported this. You had broken this story. You and Ed Clark and Team 3 broke this story. No one else had broken
in this world.
Story. No one in the world except you and Ed Clark. And I'm going to say that over and over, Representative Jordan, no one else, Wall Street Journal, no one else, CNN, had broken the story that this GSK employee was scared about. All right?
Absolutely.
So and he knew that he was going to get investigated because there was a new administration, or there, was likely to be. And you had broken the story. You and Ed Clark had broken the story. It was going to get to someone like
Yeah.
Representative Jordan. All right. But the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, CNN are not crediting the people who initiate, without whose work this GSK employee would be absolutely fine, right? No one would know this without your detective work. Is that not correct?
Yep.
The Ed Clarks
Yep.
and Team Freeze?
So the 170 patients were very hidden. They are like, if you have a 700 page document, they're in page 586. Like you really had to go with a fine, looking for it. So they hid it really well. And the documents, the first set of documents, the date of diagnosis of the 170 was incomplete. And so the second set of documents only came out in 2023, because you remember the PHMPT website, they loaded documents not in one go. It was every month there was a drop. Every month there was a drop.
I remember.
So so it was only when they loaded the second set of documents explicitly with the date of diagnosis is when we could chart really well when the 170 patients were diagnosed. And as I said, the story is when they reached the thresholds to do the analysis. And it was the first threshold was 32. And for operational reasons, Pfizer is very careful to say they discuss in conjunction with officials at the FDA. So they need to find the officials at the FDA as well and ask what the operational reasons were for not doing the analysis. And you have to understand, Pfizer said on October 29th. So now this is 2 days before the contract's due. October 29, they said, we can't do an interim analysis for operational reasons at the 32 case threshold. We'll do it when we reach at least 62 cases.
They moved the goalposts.
The problem is they had 62 cases on October 22nd.
Oh, they intentionally delayed, and you've got all the receipts. So
all the receipts.
All right. Well, CNN didn't contact you, did they?
No. Well, it was in public reporting that I've seen from the Reuters, the Wall Street Journal. So Marianne Damasi, to her credit, is the first reporter that has actually said there is probably some evidence, and she has actually cited my work. But it had, and so hopefully the tide changes. But according to the Wall Street Journal and Reuters, there's no evidence.
Dr. Kunadhasan, Reuters didn't contact you, did they?
No.
And did Representative Jordan contact you?
No.
And yet he's got a press release on his committee's website that is based on your work.
He's investigating. He may not know of my work, I think.
Well,
I'm being very kind. I'm being very kind.
Yeah. I mean, I know you want to be helpful, but I will say as a reporter and as a former political consultant, you Google it, right? Like literally a Google search of did Pfizer delay announcing vaccine till the 2020 election, till after the 2020 election, brought up your report 76. So his staff didn't do that. And I will also say, I'm going to show everyone again, it's right there. Pfizer had data to announce its COVID-19 vaccine's alleged efficacy in October 2020. Why did Pfizer delay the announcement till November 9th, 2020, 6 days after the US presidential election? The Washington Post could find this. CNN could find this. Reuters could find this. It's literally a Google search. It's like the 4th or 5th result, even with all of our shadow banning. So I know that you are incredibly gracious, and I understand that you want to be available to help Representative Jordan, but until that day comes, and I'm not going to hold my breath, because these gentlemen have shown that they're entirely willing to appropriate all of the credit for your work and Dr. Tachetta's work and Ed Clark's work and Amy Kelly's work and Ed Berkovich's work. Until that happens, how do you feel about all the labor you put into this, along with Team 3, not being even mentioned by reporters whose own reporting would be enhanced by the start of this story, right? That puts it all in context.
Well, when we did it for humanity. I put this, so it took a lot to actually, I was too scared to write this report. I only actually gathered courage to write it after I went for pilgrimage. So, and I decided the story is how a few powerful people, how a drug company can be so powerful as to affect the election of the United States. So it's actually a very scary proposition, and
Yes.
the way I look at it, it's analyzed, it's out there for humanity, and
Yeah.
when it's time, the story will break, which I hope is now. And you know, I do feel slighted if when it's not mentioned, but at the end of the day, we put it out there. It's people can see and read the receipts.
Right.
Yeah, there is evidence.
Okay.
And people should stop saying that there's no evidence.
Right. I hear you, and you're very gracious. And the trouble with working with truly enlightened heroes is that pretty much everyone who was critically important in breaking these stories is motivated by the highest motivations.
Yep.
On Team 3 and Team 1, and with this project. So they're very generous. Well, I'm not that generous. And on behalf of my team and Amy Kelly and just the ethics of intellectual property, I'm very upset that Representative Jordan, a man, is entirely appropriating your work, not to genderize it, not to racialize it, but I'm noticing that the people who are being shoved to the margins of history are not powerful white men. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah,
that's what's happening. Whatever the motivation is, the bottom line is, the people who did this work are not being invited to assist, to fill in the story, and they're not being credited. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I am sure you're going to go straight to heaven, Dr. Kunadhasan. But in the meantime, I will say, as your, editor, that it's not right. You're the author. It's not right. You should be world famous for what you described here, as famous as every one of these CNN stories, as famous as Representative Jordan. And also, let's just talk about the labor that went into this. How many hours do you think it took you and Team 3 and Ed Clark to put together the pieces of what you're describing as a 500-page document at the least?
Oh, it was many hours. It was insane. I think after that, we just couldn't do many other reports. It was many, many, many hours. We had to really dig deep to find the data. Obviously I was fired because I, couldn't work for at least 2 years with the mandate requirements for COVID-19 vaccine. So I had the time. But it took many, 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 many hours and a lot of time to actually figure it through, because the story wasn't so obvious.
Right. No, indeed. It's very, very complex, but only you and Ed Clark and Team 3 had the skill set at the time. I mean, this is something that, Steve Bannon and I discussed when we talked about the importance of this project. Reporters at CNN or the Wall Street Journal and staffers on the Judiciary Committee or on Senator Johnson's staff don't have the time or expertise to pour through these documents and piece them together. They don't. So they never would have reached these conclusions without your work, Ed Clark's and Team 3's. And that is just a fact. Well, now let's talk about your personal heroism. All right. I was there. I mean, another reason I'm very upset, and people who watched my broadcast yesterday about the appropriation of Dr. Techeda's work and Ed Berkovich's work and Amy Kelly work by Senator Johnson's staff, I literally broke down in tears because it was so scary in 2023. We started this project in 2022. I was deplatformed in 2021. You were laid off, or whatever, mandated out. I assume that means you wouldn't take the shots. So you were forbidden to work.
I was fired.
You got fired. I can't imagine what that did to your finances and your stress levels. Very bad. But it was the thing that I'm having a lot of trouble with, and I'm just being honest with my audience, is it's safe now. There's a new administration. It's safe for Jim Jordan to scamper out in public and chat with the Wall Street Journal and, get all the accolades about dealing with this Pfizer corruption. It's safe for Senator Jordan, to scamper out and appropriate without due credit the work of Ed Berkovich and Amy Kelly and Dr. Tichetta. But it wasn't safe at all in 2022, 2023, when we began this work, into all of 2024. It was terrifying. I was getting blowback. To this day, I get threats every month, death threats, threats of all kinds, lawfare threats. You had been fired and you were speaking up in a country that was even worse than the United States and Australia, more restrictive. There were quarantine camps, and you were going against what was then, and I was, and Amy was, we were issuing reports that were going up against the United States government. We were revealing misdeeds by one of the most powerful corporations on earth, Pfizer, and the then Biden administration and the FDA, people who were still in power, people who could still, cause IRS audits or lawfare or arrests, for nonsense. Like, it was so scary. So I'm very, very angry and upset that there was silence from Representative Jordan and Senator Johnson during those years about this issue. I mean, Senator Johnson did some hearings about the vaccine injured, but they weren't taking on Pfizer, the way they should have when you issued Report 27, the one that I just read. I'm sorry, 76. 23, sorry. They should have held the hearings then and dealt with the risk. But they didn't. They waited till it was safe. I'm not going to use the word that comes to mind, but it's a naughty word. Okay. Not courageous men, not courageous, waiting till it's safe to steal the work of I'm sorry, this is me talking, not you, Jeyanthi. Courageous men would have come forward in 2023 when you and I and Amy broke these stories and had us supported by the power of the Senate and the Congress, even though they were in a minority at that time then. But they didn't. They waited till it was safe. And now they're not even crediting the people who made the story possible. So talk to me about what you risked and maybe still risk in Australia. I mean, I remember you speaking up and getting threatened or, intimidated by professional organizations. What did you face in being so brave at that time in a way that Representative Jordan and Senator Johnson were not?
Well, obviously I got fired because when they actually when they approved the vaccine for pregnant women, I thought to myself, the wheels have fallen off in medicine. We never give drugs with this kind of a history to pregnant women. I mean, for doctors, thalidomide should be in living memory, and you just don't give drugs with this short a history to with the name mRNA in it to women who are producing babies at that point. So I thought to myself, the wheels have fallen off. And if some in medicine, and I sort of resented that I felt like I had to take a stand because, I was the first female staff anesthetist in my hospital in Australia. Right. I was in a regional hospital. And so, for the first 3 years because I'm a migrant to Australia, and for the first 3 years when I attended staff meetings, I didn't speak because I was too scared to speak. I didn't think my words had any value.
That's so sad.
And then I come to Australia, and then this is like the biggest ethical egress in medicine that I've seen. And everybody's just rolling up their sleeve, and nobody's even every doctor should have just been able to take a stand on the ethics of it, on the mandation. But when they actually said pregnant women can have it, I was like, the wheels have fallen off in medicine. Some of it, I just have to take a stand. I cannot sit with this. So obviously I got fired. And then after that, I spoke out in public because obviously we wouldn't get a platform. So I spoke out in public places. So one of my speeches was on in front of the State Library in Victoria. And I basically said that it was not honorable for doctors not to be able to tell their patients what in their medical opinion harms them. So this is a public speech, but I do not mention the word vaccine, and I get an anonymous notification and a threat to my license. So I'm here
your license.
My medical license.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here, I've been fired, and had go through all of that. Like, you become a non-person the next day.
Wow.
Colleagues who've known you just decide, they don't know you at all. And even my previous workplace just dumped my things in front of my door and said bye. You know what I mean? So it was a very horrible procedure. And then they're going after my licensure, and I'm the first doctor in my family.
Yeah.
My parents didn't have much means, so it was a really big thing to stand up. Yeah,
I'm so
I didn't think I was so emotional about it, but
No,
and
you're
so I
intimidated.
just
Mhm.
yeah, but I just so by the time it came to report 76, I was the way when I figured out how Pfizer delayed the vaccine efficacy results around the US election time, I was like, this is scary. It was actually quite scary to have figured it out,
Yeah,
even
I'm
though I'm
sure.
in Australia. Yeah.
I'm sure.
And I'm like fired, and I'm like, and then I'm just, do I write this? Do I not? Like, I was actually really afraid. So in the end, I just did it. I just thought I'd put it out there for humanity, and what they do with it is their thing.
I
So
can't, honestly, I can't, like, I cried yesterday. I'm crying again today. I can't stand it. So you should, like, everything about this story is so heroic, right? You're from a, I guess, not, born with a silver spoon in your mouth, family from Malaysia originally.
yep. My grandparents are from Sri Lanka,
Sri
but
Lanka
yeah,
via
in
Malaysia,
Malaysia as well.
immigrated, or you or the family immigrated to Australia. You went to medical school. You overcame, many hurdles. You got your medical degree. You you are not the person to take on the United States government or Pfizer. You don't have a giant war chest of lawyers behind you. You don't even have your institutions behind you. You've been fired by your institution. Your license is being threatened. And instead of Representative Jordan or Senator Johnson or the Wall Street Journal coming forward at that time to cover or support you, in breaking this story, you do it on your own with, nothing but the help of
Ed Clark and Amy Kelly and you.
Well, yes, but we were barely surviving on, $5 and $10 donations from, people sending us checks out of their Medicaid, out of their Social Security. Again, like, the posse isn't rich, and literally they were sending us tiny checks to fund this work. And we were terrified, and we were getting lawfare, and we were, we had to pay cybersecurity experts, and we were getting death threats. And so, and I remember you kept saying, like, write to, send this to the Attorney General. And that was the Biden administration at that time. And I'm like, we're scared to do that because we're within this country, in this state where I'm sitting right now, Dr. Kunadhasan, that had and still has, but it was much scarier than quarantine camps where they can hold you indefinitely. And you were doing all of this in a country that had quarantine camps where at least one of your members of parliament was detained in a quarantine camp, one of the few who gave us a platform. So I'm not saying he was detained for that reason, but the detention threat was real, and all the other threats you faced were real. So I'm glad you shared that story. And, we've all been very brave. I think you've been among the bravest, but it isn't right, and as brave, you did it, is the point that I'm making. You did it. You came forward. You wrote that piece. I did it. I came forward. Amy Kelly came forward. We edited your piece and Ed Clark's piece. I went on War Room. I did everything I could to shine a light. It was terrifying. I know that we're all very brave people, but I'm just saying, for the record, it was an absolutely terrifying undertaking in a terrifying time. And now a bunch of powerful men are just taking our work and writing us out of history. I'm not saying you did that. You believe that, but that is my feeling. And Emmy says this is incredibly frustrating. So, I too try to be, egoless and serve humanity, but at the same time, I'm very well aware of power dynamics in history as a former consultant to the Clinton effort and to Vice President Gore, and as a White House spouse in the past. And it matters who's recognized by CNN. I mean, I tried to explain this yesterday. Why does credit matter in this I know you are taking the high road. This is not you speaking, it's me. Credit to Dr. Kunadhasan and Ed Clark and Team 3 and Amy Kelly for this work that Representative Jordan is simply appropriating, and CNN and the Wall Street Journal and so on. It's important for many reasons. One is that it protects them, right? They still face danger. She's still in Australia. It's still terrifying. You know, people are going to prison for what they're saying on social media in Australia. So she still needs support. She still needs help. And it would protect her and Ed Clark and Amy Kelly and me, but her most of all, if she were invited to testify on Capitol Hill or to testify in a Senate hearing. That provides incredible protection globally from the kinds of, you know, threats, harassment, you know, layoffs, you know, whatever it is they're going to try to do to her that she faces otherwise. And the same for me and same for Amy Kelly. The other thing is resources. You know, we're all broke, right? I'm not going to speak for you, Dr. Kunadhasan, but, you know, you were laid off. You know, many of our best volunteers were living on, you know, on their savings because they'd been laid off. They couldn't work as pharmacists or as, you know, physicians because they wouldn't be quiet and they wouldn't take the injection. They knew the dangers, and they were you know, it was desperate economic times. It still is for many of us. You know, I certainly burned through all my savings underwriting this project. I don't have, you know, I don't have a retirement pension. I don't have anything. I'm a writer. I mean, I don't have anything that I can rely on except my own resources. But that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that didn't stop us. But if you're invited to testify and you're written into the historic record, lots of other things happen, like speaking engagements and book contracts and compensation for your ideas and your work. So Dr. Kunadhasan, she's not saying this, I am, and Ed Clark and Amy Kelly are really having that stolen from them, you know, that flow of support and resources by not being credited. And lastly, there's history. You know, there's some little, you know, Malaysian girl who's good at science and technology who should see, or Australian girl, right? Or just girl in the United States or boy, right? Who should see Dr. Kunadhasan testifying, you know, along with all these other guys, and think I can do this too. She overcame all these hurdles. It didn't stop her. She's so brave. She's so skilled. She's so intelligent. I can do this too. And that little girl or boy is being deprived of that role model, that example. And, you know, you and Team 3 and Amy Kelly should, there's finally history, you know, what you did should live on after you are no longer on this planet. And, you know, Representative Jordan is doing everything possible to be in the history books. You know, Senator Johnson, the 5, well, I'm sorry, but white men who testified, or, you know, one of them, but, you know, maybe 2 of them, whatever, I'm not going to evaluate them. Some of them I respect very much, but Senator Johnson's job as convener is to properly credit people whose work he's using. Same with Representative Jordan and his staff. So I am upset. You know, you and I at this rate are going to be, and Amy Kelly and Team 3 and all the people who labored are going to be erased from the history books. So it matters because it means that generations to come who could be inspired by this story won't even know about it. So all of that is gross. You know, my headline yesterday was MAHA is grossing me out. And the way your achievement is being treated, given especially all the hurdles and terror you faced and still face, is just gross. And I just want to say for the record, it's gross. I still don't want to take on, you know, some of the most powerful people in the country. I am exhausted from 4 years of having taken on the last administration, you know, but I'm saying for the sake of my team and for the sake of history, it's gross. You should be credited. CNN should call you. Reuters should call you. The Wall Street Journal should call you. And Representative Jordan should update his website to credit your work, Team 3's work, Ed Clark's work. And that's what I have to say in conclusion. Is there anything else you would like to say about all of this and about the story itself?
Well, I hope the story gets traction. And it's a scary story. It's a scary story of how, in the end, when I got fired and I thought, like, we're so powerless. I have 4 degrees in medicine, and my job was taken away by a premier who took 6 years to do a 4-year arts degree, and I couldn't have the
Wow.
voice.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
oh my God.
He took 6 years to do a 4-year arts degree, and I have 4 degrees in medicine, and I couldn't decide my own medical treatment.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm an anesthetist. I was at higher risk of getting COVID from my patients than anyone in the who in the line of trying to fire me.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm way high. And I turned up for work even when they didn't have masks.
Wow.
I mean, in the early days of the pandemic, there were no masks, right? But I still turned up for work, ready to treat anyone, and so it's really scary that for doctors, I think the tragedy of this is we've allowed our profession to be politicized. And I really hope, and that's why I was so, when I talked about the hidden death story, I was like, we need to tell more doctors that at the point of the drug approval, they hit the deaths. Because I just want medicine to come back to its highest ideal, and we've let our voices and our profession be drowned out. And I did it for that. I did it more even for the people who were before me. I did it for the medical students who would come after me. So I hope that more people understand the report 76 is actually a story of the contractual basis of Pfizer and the Trump administration. Was basically that. And at the end of the day, you can go after a contractual agreement. And that's what I want Congressman Jim Jordan to know. And I hope he gets to know of the story.
Well said. I have to say, as someone
I know what you, but
I'm not going to belabor it. I'm just saying, as a woman who worked hard to get a higher degree, listening to the fact that you got 4 medical degrees and, you're being silenced by people who literally, don't know, which end of a medical textbook is up is, very frustrating. But you are a better person than I am, Dr. Kunadhasan. You are a noble person. And how do people find you and support you, if that's what you?
Thank you. So anyway, I'm just on Twitter as Dr. J. Kunadhasan, and the volunteers have moved on to pandemicinvestigationproject.com, so you can find our work there.
Wonderful. And you guys should support these amazing volunteers, and also continue to support us at DailyClout, because we continue to do everything we can to bring their work to the public, the work they did while they were with us, which is as relevant, if not more so, as ever, especially now that it's being appropriated without credit on Capitol Hill. All right, everyone. Dr. Kunadhasan, thank you so much for joining us so late where you are. Thank you for all your heroism.
Very hot where I am as well.
Very hot where you are, yes. And remember, guys, we need your help too. So please subscribe or donate at dailyclout.io, even if it's just a one-time donation. We urgently need it to keep our doors open. And you can help us over at Substack on Outspoken, subscribe or donate, or Behind the FDA Curtain, where you can find Dr. Kunadhasan's work and her colleagues' work when they were with us at the War Room DailyClout Pfizer Documents Research team. And you can buy the book in which Dr. Kunadhasan's work is featured, and that's the Pfizer papers on Skyhorse or Amazon. Thank you, Dr. Kunadhasan. Honestly, I feel inspired and grateful to talk to you no matter what we face.
Thank you.
All right.